This episode is brought to you by Merrill. We all have goals, and we all want to get to those goals, whether that's saving for a home renovation, that once-in-a-lifetime trip to your favourite Grand Prix, or even retirement. We all want a straightforward path to those goals, but the real world doesn't usually work that way. Merrill understands that. That's why with a dedicated Merrill advisor, you get a personalised plan and a clear path forward. And having the bull at your back helps your whole financial life move with you. So when your plans change, Merrill's with you every step of the way. Go to ml.com/bullish to learn more. Merrill, a Bank of America company. What would you like the power to do? Investing involves risk. Merrill Lynch, Pierce, Fenner & Smith Incorporated, registered broker-dealer, registered investment advisor, member SIPC.
This episode is supported by Merrill. With a dedicated Merrill advisor, you get a personalized plan for your financial goals. And when plans change, Merrill's with you every step of the way. Go to ml.com/bullish to learn more. Merrill, a Bank of America company. What would you like the power to do? Investing involves risk. Merrill Lynch, Pierce, Fenner & Smith Incorporated, registered broker-dealer, registered investment advisor, member SIPC.
Creating really great retail experiences is tough, especially with multiple stores, teams of staff, fulfillment centers, separate workflows. It's a lot. But with Shopify Point of Sale, you can do it all without complexity. Shopify's point of sale system is a unified command center for your retail business. It brings together in-store and online operations, even across 1,000 locations. Imagine being able to guarantee that shopping is just always convenient. Endless aisles, ship to customer, buy online, pickup in store, all made simpler so customers can shop how and where they want, and staff have the tools they need to close the sale every time. And let's face it, acquiring new customers is expensive. With Shopify POS, you can keep existing shoppers coming back to your stores with consistent, tailored experiences and first-party data that give marketing teams a competitive edge. Want more? Check out at shopify.com/theathletic, all lowercase, and learn how to create the best retail experiences without complexity. Shopify.com/theathletic.
The Athletic.
Hello and welcome to this preview podcast for the Valencia test that's almost upon us as Formula E gears up for its 11th season. I'm your host, Andrew Vanderberg, and joining me as ever is the race's intrepid Formula E correspondent, Sam Smith, who will be out there as the third and a half, as I should call them, generation of Formula E cars hit the track. We'll also have a very special guest, new Maserati MSG driver Jake Hughes, and we'll also be hearing from his new teammate, Stoffel Vandoorne. So, Jake, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you.
Thank you very much, guys. Thanks for having me on. It's always a pleasure.
So, a switch of teams, off to the lovely deep blue of Maserati, one of the proudest names in motorsport. How did all did that come about?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think the blue quite suits me. Some people have been quite key to point out that the blue is very similar to a certain football team that I'm not the biggest fan of.
Blue noses. We love the blue noses.
Exactly. But no, I think it suits me, and it's been a great few months so far working with the team. But in terms of answering your question of how it came about, I mean, towards sort of around May, June last year, of course, we're approaching the end of the season, and you, together with your management, you want to make sure that you're analysing every single option out there for you. You want to make sure the next step of your career is always bettering your future career. And for me, I felt like 2 years into Formula E, I'd gone through that sort of honeymoon phase, if you will, of, performing as a rookie, and even in my second year, adding some more pole positions and adding my first podium to my CV. I really feel like from now on, I need to kick on. I need to make sure that I'm positioning myself in the best possible place to show what I can do and to fight at the front of the grid a lot more often. And with all the analysis we do with my management, as I said, it really felt like joining Maserati MSG was the next best step for my career.
It's a team that's a proven race winner, Obviously, you've said that's a stated objective. How realistic is that? We know at the front, Formula E is super competitive at the moment.
Yeah, well, the team in previous guises and obviously in its current guise as well as Maserati MSG have been very successful, multiple race winners over a number of years. So from that point, work and knowing the people that we have in the team, I'm absolutely under no doubt that we have, the people we need to fight at the front, and hopefully we will be able to do that. Obviously, the elephant in the room, so to speak, is the change to the Gen3Evo or Gen 3.5, whatever you want to call it. And, a change of homologation. Manufacturers will bring new powertrains and new hardware and things like this. So we don't know the answers to that yet in terms of how competitive we will be. Of course, we hope to made a step with our manufacturer, Stellantis. But testing has gone well. The car's been very reliable. I've got up to speed and felt comfortable very quickly with, things like all the new software and systems that, it's not to be sniffed at how much that can change the driver's perception of and confidence with a car. And that's been very linear for me so far. I haven't had any stress with that. So yeah, from that point of view, really hopeful that we'll be able to fight at the front, but we'll obviously have to wait and see. And hopefully Valencia gives us a bit more of a read on that.
We've spoken to a couple of drivers about the Gen3Evo, and obviously we've seen the performance figures, which sound super impressive. How much of a difference is it, especially having that front-driven axle as well?
Yeah, in four-wheel drive mode, it's extremely impressive. We have four-wheel drive for starts for the duals and for attack mode. And yeah, the change in first of all, the pure acceleration is extremely impressive. I mean, actually, the first time I tested the car, I've got quite used to over the years of when you do a race start, I wouldn't put my head on the headrest, let's say, for when it was time to launch the car. And the launch is so violent now that the first two times I did it without resting my head on the headrest, I basically got drop kicked by my own race car.
Wow.
on the back of the head. It's that violent. So after those two times of that happening, I thought, right, well, I might start to lean my preload my head on the headrest, ready for the start. And yeah, it's extremely impressive. We're doing 2 seconds flat consistently, and even a 1.9 at some point. So I think the big change with the Gen3Evo car will have an effect in the attack mode phase of the races. I think it's fair to say that over the last 2 years, attack mode probably wasn't as much of a strategic tool as maybe it was in the Gen 2 era. Well,
it just didn't give you enough of an advantage, did it?
Yeah, exactly. I think the extra power for the grip we had in rear-wheel drive, we weren't able to really use it. And in some places, we could even decide that it was a bit of a hindrance for, whether it be tyre wear or tyre temperature, battery temperature, whatever it may be. There wasn't enough lap time gain in some tracks and some events. So I think everyone is very hopeful that attack mode should become much more of a strategic tool now. I can only go off feeling. Obviously, I haven't been in a race environment yet, but the feeling in four-wheel drive is very different. The car drives very different. The lap time gain is a lot, let's say. So yeah, I'm really hopeful that should be the case.
Jay, you're going to have a bit more push, and as you say, the attack mode should be much more effective for you to use. But of course, the tyres have changed subtly as well, haven't they? What can you tell us about those? Are they going to be as quirky as they have been in their hardness and in the fact that they are extremely durable? How's that going to, in the mix of the front axle being active, is it going to be a big change for you to cope with?
Yeah, I mean, it obviously, without saying so much, it is different. The tyre, it is behaving differently to the season 10 tyre, as we call it now. It's become quite famous on the season 10 tyre. It was very durable. You could do lap time after lap time after lap time, and it just became a question of managing tyre temperature rather than tyre wear. What we've seen in testing so far, the tyre is definitely softer and is providing more of a lap time benefit when new compared to the previous tyre. So there is a bit more of a peak. And then we are seeing generally a bit more wear. We've been to 2 different tracks. Well, I've been to 2 different tracks. Of course, the the test team have been to a lot more than those two tracks that I've driven at. But my experience between the two tracks was very different in terms of the wear pattern of the tyre, whether it was front axle, rear axle. How many laps into a stint did you start to feel the drop and these things. So it will still be typical motorsport in the sense that it will be very track specific. But I suppose from a headline point of view, you could say that we would expect a little bit more tyre wear than we've become used to.
How much of an impact do you feel it will have on the actual racing? Are we still going to have the peloton race? I know we're not allowed to call it that anymore. Is that going to carry on?
I think, without seeing the usable energy and, what restrictions we may or may not have from WAE side, obviously I can't say for sure whether we will in every event have the same as what we had last year. Let's say, thinking to Brazil, I think you could probably imagine that we will see an element of the pack racing, as I think is a bit more of a term that we've become used to using now. In terms of how the tyre will affect that, it's hard to say at the moment. Obviously, I think we will have a first sort of run through it in a race scenario in Valencia. And that is a track in general that if we were to race there now in Gen 3.5, or even in the Gen 3 era, you would expect an element of pack racing. So I think we'll get a bit more answers after Valencia in terms of how much the tyre will affect it. But we are anticipating that there will be some different choices, let's say, like that up and down the grid in terms of how you use your tyre through the weekend. If you have a single header, one race event, you get two sets of new tyres. So how do you want to use that? Do you want to use them both in practice? Do you want to save a set for quali? Do you want to save a set for the race? There will be all these different possibilities. It is what we're kind of anticipating to see. And I think it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all solution. I think different teams will have different opinions from what they've seen in testing. So it still remains to be seen a little bit.
Jake, talking of choices, the FIA and Formula E are getting creative again on the sporting regs for next season. It's our understanding that shortly within the regs there'll be an option that can be deployed, which is going under the moniker the golden laps, whereby two random lap numbers will be issued before the start of the race, and whoever's leading those will get an extra point. Fairly extraordinary initiative, this. What are your thoughts on it? Because obviously there's a lot going on anyway in the races with the overall strategy, the energy management, the attack modes, potentially attack charge if that comes in. How would you feel about something like that been tossed into the mix?
I mean, it's definitely pushing the boat out and pushing the boundaries a little. It's definitely different. It's probably the word I would use. I do admire Formula E throughout its history in that sense of always trying to be, find different solutions of how to make a race, go, let's say. And I think Formula E should always be trying to be, pushing the boundary in that sense, so to speak. But from the limited knowledge I have of it at the moment, because literally I see the headlines written. I've spoken to my engineers, my team boss, and had a little bit of a debrief on what the golden lap might look like. My initial feeling is I'm not sure if it's completely necessary if you consider the fact that we're planning to use attack charge, and the attack mode and in general would hopefully become a lot more of a strategic tool, as I mentioned before, next year. So I think those two things already would give a very different look to the races. So this extra one is going to be interesting to see how the teams see, how much weight they put behind that point, or the 2 points potentially during the race. My gut feeling is you will probably still, as a team and as a strategy, still biased towards protecting energy, protecting tire, track position, the end game, let's say, rather than compromising the rest of your race for the sake of those 1 or 2 laps. But obviously we don't know everything about it yet, so we have to reserve judgment a little bit.
Sam, so the golden laps are announced before the race, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Well, what happens if there's a safety car on those laps?
Good question.
I think I think this is maybe some separate articles that might be in the regulations. As Jake says, it's hard to actually give a rounded opinion of it because it's in regulations we haven't seen yet. They will be, I think by the time this podcast comes out, it probably will be public knowledge. But the idea is that it would be in the team information which is given ahead of the event. And yeah, I would imagine that there must be an additional article that suggests that if it is a safety car, that either it's null and void or it is the next racing lap after that. I would guess.
And I know you don't know the answer to this, but I'm throwing it out there anyway. Is there a window in which they are? Because if it's like randomly drawn, say it's the penultimate lap of the race, but there's a red flag, you might not actually get to that lap.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many questions about this. I mean, Formula E didn't comment on it when I reached out to them. We ran the story because we know that it's been presented to team principals and other key stakeholders in the championship, and it was met with a range of opinions. One of which was it went down like a knackered lift, and the other was from a driver that I spoke to, not Jake, as we know.
He's been very diplomatic and very professional. Well done, Jake.
Another driver who said to me one of the greatest quotes ever, which was, "It would be like switching off air traffic control at an international airport," which I thought was fantastic. Just when you...
But it's a bit of a throwback though, right? Because in the old days before F1 was sort of homogenised, some races would pay out at certain parts of the race, and there's that famous story about Jackie Stewart having a deal with Ken Tyrrell.
Yes.
They got paid
Monza.
A quarter race, half race and three quarters, so he made sure he led all of those laps just to make sure he won the most money.
Yeah, or maybe they do a financial incentive instead of a points one. You know what these drivers are like. They'll
Oh, you'd be up for that, wouldn't you, Jake?
I was going to say, if they put a financial incentive on, you would see a hell of a race for that.
Yeah, or just wholesale carnage. I mean, when what Formula E doesn't really need is messing around with its sporting format, because I think it's actually really good. It's got priorities beyond that. I mean, the fact that it needs much better TV coverage, and it needs more streaming, and it needs a whole lot of other things other than tinkering or adding another layer of complexity to the sporting legs. Formula E races, and I know this because I watch them all and I study them all.
You lap chart them, right?
I tell you what, if I lap charted Formula E races, I would be a mathematical genius. And anyone who watches Formula E races, particularly these pack racing events, you have to be completely concentrated on the races. And that's great because it engages the audiences. But there is a fine line between doing that and overcomplicating it and making it unreadable and unfathomable. And I feel as though this would accelerate that, let's say. So let's see. I mean, you've got to be a little bit agnostic about it until it actually happens. But mine and many others I've spoken to, including drivers, as I said, their initial reaction is that this absolutely doesn't need to be part of Formula E racing at this stage.
Jake, I mentioned in the intro, you've got a new teammate, Stoffel Vandoorne, somebody you would have worked with back when you were a part of the Mercedes setup.
Yep.
Looking forward to working with him. What's the relationship like?
Yeah, very much so. As you say, I mean, I've had various years. How many years did I work with Stoffel? At least 2, maybe even towards 3 years at Mercedes, and together with him and Nick, obviously De Vries at the time, we got on really well. I was learning a lot from them, asking a lot of questions, and obviously Stoffel ended up winning his world championship in the last year. We worked together, so we ended on a good note, so to speak. And in the last 2 years, we haven't managed to fall out on track, racing for different teams. So that's been a positive. And yeah, I've been at a test of him so far, and also even as early, recent as yesterday, Paris, sort of doing some media work with him. And yeah, the relationship's still very strong, very good. I think we're very respectful of each other's drivers, and I think we're very much looking forward to working together.
He's obviously got a little bit to prove. He didn't have a brilliant time in his last sort of driver move. Do you sense that he's sort of really up for the fight now? Yeah,
I mean, I don't see why he wouldn't be that in every single event anyway. I'm pretty sure he is. He's he's the type of driver, I'm sure, that doesn't just want to rest on winning a world championship once. I think he wants to try and achieve that again, and I'm sure he sees that racing with Maserati MSG can help him achieve that. Again, I think it's fair to say that, he's been very, very impressive in qualifying the last few years. And I think in the non-pack races as well, I think he's been impressive. The pack races are still, whilst it feels like we've been dealing with them for a while now, it still feels like a completely new phenomenon. And there's definitely some drivers and teams out there that have got on with it better than others. I think even speaking about myself, I've had good races and bad races, and I would say in general, I've not been quite where I wanted to be in the pack races. And I think Stoffel would probably give you the same answer. It's fair to say. But it's about learning the lessons now and trying to analyse the races we had in the last few years and trying to make sure that we also preempt what is going to happen next in these races. Because, for example, in Portland last year, I think we all expected the race to be a bit slower than it was in the second race on the Sunday. And a lot of people got in trouble on the Sunday race expecting a race that didn't happen. So the goalpost is always moving with these pack races. But I think both me and Stoffel, we will go into the season with a lot more confidence than we did in the last year.
We're speaking on the eve of the Valencia test. How much should we read into this? Right? Is this about lap times, or is there much more lurking behind the scenes?
Lap times is always a tricky one. I think you don't get in Formula E what you have in other formulas with the level of sandbagging, with fuel and power modes and things like this. It is a bit easier to sort of, if you obsess with lap times, you can analyze it a little bit, but still, nevertheless, there's a lot that's going on in the background. It's literally testing. We're testing a lot of things, whether it be hardware, software, setup, tires. You're compromising certain runs to hopefully learn and give you an answer that will benefit you in the long run going into the race in the season. So you have to be careful judging it. But I think, it is a new set of regulations. So I think if there's any weaknesses out there, any cracks in manufacturing teams, whether it be from a reliability point of view or just not quite being where they wanted to be with their new powertrain, for example, not maybe understanding the tyre, it is a time to maybe be able to see those cracks a bit easier in the beginning before we inevitably all, learn what we've got. And engineers and drivers are very good at quickly understanding where they're weak and improving that. So from that point of view, I think Valencia will show that up a little bit if it does exist at all.
Well, great. Thank you very much for your time, Jake. Look forward to Sam and I reading far too much into testing times and who may or may not be in trouble. But that's all part of the fun.
Exactly.
So, thank you very much for coming on the show, and wish you all the best of luck for season 11.
Thanks for having me. Anytime.
The Race F1 podcast is brought to you by Merrill. It's no secret that finances can get complicated. Like me, I'm sure many of you listening will have financial goals. Perhaps it's even saving up for that trip to a Grand Prix far afield. Whatever your goals are, from starting a business to saving for kids' college to getting more stamps in your passport, you want a straightforward path there. But life tends to have other plans, and things get in your way. Merrill understands that. That's why with a dedicated Merrill advisor, you get a personalised plan that can help keep your money in sync with your life. So with the bull at your back, no matter what life brings, you get a clear path forward. Go to ml.com/bullish to learn more. Merrill, a Bank of America company. What would you like the power to do? Investing involves risk. Merrill Lynch, Pierce, Fenner & Smith Incorporated, registered broker-dealer, registered investment advisor, member SIPC.
This episode is supported by Merrill. With a dedicated Merrill advisor, you get a personalized plan for your financial goals. And when plans change, Merrill's with you every step of the way. Go to ml.com/bullish to learn more. Merrill, a Bank of America company. What would you like the power to do? Investing involves risk. Merrill Lynch, Pierce, Fenner & Smith Incorporated, registered broker-dealer, registered investment advisor, member SIPC.
As you've probably heard by now, we've teamed up with BetMGM this season. We'll be using BetMGM lines to make all of our picks, and we'll have special offers for our listeners each week. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code THEATHLETIC, and you'll get a 1-year subscription to The Athletic, plus up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using bonus code THEATHLETIC. Make your first deposit of at least $10 $50. Place your first bet on any game and claim your voucher for a 1-year subscription to The Athletic. See BetMGM.com for terms. U.S. promotional offers not available in D.C., Mississippi, New York, Nevada, Ontario, or Puerto Rico. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Available in the U.S. Call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369 in New York. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP in Arizona. 1-800-327-5050 in Massachusetts. 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa. 1-800-270-7117 for confidential help in Michigan. 1-800-981-0023 in Puerto Rico. First bet offer for new customers only in partnership with Kansas Crossing Casino and Hotel. Don't forget, if you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code The Athletic, and you'll get a 1-year subscription to The Athletic, plus up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager.
Great to have Jake on with us there, taking us through what's going on. Obviously, a big move for him.
It is a big move. I mean, he... Yeah, it was interesting the way it all happened. I tend to think that, Jake Hughes is managed by Mark Blundell, who we both know, and, one of the wiliest managers you could want to have, right? I mean, very experienced, knows the industry, will look out for all of his clients and get the best deal available on the market, and I think that's what happened. I sense, actually, I feel... it's kind of McLaren's loss rather than the other way around.
Maserati's gain.
Yeah, I think so. I spoke to Cyril Blay, who is the new team principal, by the way.
Yeah, we've got some news there, Sam. Do you want to introduce this rather than just dropping the name?
Well, he has become the new team principal. He was deputy team principal last year and was also engineering Max Gunter in a sort of multi-role thing. Now he's the team principal, and they've got a new engineer. Actually, they've got Jean-Eric Vernzol, engineer at DS, who's come in to look after Stoffel. I think that's the way around it is. Yeah, I think he's looking after Vandoorne. So it just felt a bit strange. Hughes, I thought, did really well over the 2 seasons. Results-wise, qualifying, there was no question. He was one of the top qualifiers on his day. I mean, he got, I think, 3 pole positions at the end. Got that podium at Shanghai. He outscored his teammate René Rast. And then I think... by dint of Sam Bird's win at Sao Paulo, I think he was just slightly behind Sam. I think it was a couple of points in it at the end of the season. Obviously Neon McLaren have got Taylor Barnard, who, although did a good job last season, there's still obviously a lot of questions still to be answered on whether he's a viable replacement. You
have to imagine their first choice was probably to keep Jake.
I think that is the crux of the question, isn't it? And it didn't happen. The presumption, and obviously both parties won't be drawn on it because it's their business, is the business. Is the fact that it's there's a financial element to it. And look, Jake's turned 30 this year. He's proved himself on the international stage, and he's come from a heritage, a history in his career where he started late and actually didn't have bags of money or didn't have big benefactors or patrons behind him, has made his own way and done it through a bit of ducking and diving and getting drives here and there, and he's making a career for himself. So he and his management are quite rightly looking out for their careers, and I think it's just nothing more than that. But I was quite surprised that McLaren didn't fight to keep him more, I think is what I'm saying.
Interesting. What's Cyril's background?
Yeah, so Cyril Blay is an engineer, studied in the UK, has worked for, in his past, Arden. He was chief engineer at Arden in Formula 2, engineered Max Gunter in his season in F2. He then moved to Mahindra and worked predominantly with Alex Lynn and was the engineer when Alex won at Excel. Worked then and then moved to Venturi, worked with Lucas Di Grassi in his one-off season at Venturi, and then moved on to Max Gunter for the last 2 seasons, and obviously was integral in getting those 2 wins in Jakarta and in Tokyo for Gunter. So yeah, very, very how best to describe him? Very pragmatic, obviously technically orientated, quietly impressive is the word. I got to know him much more at the start of last season, and good chats, very solid, and the drivers that he has worked with, they only have very, very good things to say about him. And I think he has been instrumental in getting a bit more cohesiveness in that team, bringing in some new people, and it's good to see somebody promoted from within, in a sense. And I think he is a studious and, as I said, pragmatic guy, and I think that's exactly what Maserati needs. So a good move all round, I think. And I think with Vandoorne and Hughes, who he would have been key to getting into the team, I think they could be looking really good next season. I'm not going to make any predictions about Maserati this season.
No, you'll only make yourself look a fool.
Disgrace. Yeah. So I'm just going to say the facts. I think they're in a good position.
Oh, well, you mentioned Stoffel there. You spoke to him earlier. Let's hear what you had to say.
Okay, Stoffel, great for you to join us. You've just switched from DS Penske to the Maserati MSG squad for next season. New challenge. Same hardware, essentially, but obviously a Gen 3 Evo outlook to what you're going to be performing with next season. First of all, tell us about the last few weeks. It became public that you've joined Maserati MSG. How are you feeling about the operation and getting to know all the personnel there?
Yeah, feeling very good about it. Obviously, I'm kind of staying within the same family, the Stellantis family. So in terms of the car, there won't be much of an adaptation process for me, let's say. So that will definitely help quite a lot. But also the team is kind of on the journey, I would say, on the move. Some good new people joining there, and I've met the team kind of already a couple of years back, let's say, when they were still Venturi and when they were a Mercedes customer team, and they've always had a lot of success. So I kind of knew some of the guys, but since then there's also some new people that have joined, and I think we've got a really good opportunity. I feel very strong team, and I think sometimes not being a manufacturer can be a little bit of an advantage sometimes when you don't have to kind of look after all the reliability side of the powertrain, let's say. So being within a team like that, it's really kind of purely focused on performance and extracting the maximum out of that. So I'm excited for it. Can't wait to start driving and to see how we get on in Gen 3.5. It's going to be a little bit different tires, 4-wheel drive. So lots to look forward to.
Based in Monaco as well, so no expenses that you've got to claim in terms of going from A to B. I mean, does that make any kind of difference? I guess it does in a way, doesn't it? You'd have to travel to sort of sim sessions, or you can literally pop in and speak to the engineers. It's quite convenient to have that on your doorstep.
Yeah, it's definitely convenient. It's kind of 5 minutes on my scooter to get there. So I think it's just going to be a little bit easier to kind of build a more close relationship with the guys in the team. Just because when I'm home, it's just a little bit easier for the team as well to just call me if they want to try something in the simulator. And also from a logistics point of view, for me, it's gonna be quite nice to have a little bit more days at home, let's say, especially when you're doing 2 programs with Formula E WEC. It just saves about 30 flights probably a year, let's say, where you have to go to the simulator usually. So having those nights in your own bed, let's say, is always welcome, let's say.
And tell me a bit about the Gen 3 Evo. A lot of the drivers saying that it's going to be sort of 2 to 3 seconds faster potentially. Obviously, we've got this active nature of the front powertrain, which is one of the key parts of evolving the Gen 3 design. I mean, how do you look at that? Because it's been clear in the first 2 races of Gen 3 Evo that actually the attack mode hasn't been as it was designed, let's say. But are you presuming that it will make a reasonable difference to get the traction you need, use the new tyres, the new look tyres from Hankook a bit more, and it'll be more advantageous to use the attack mode now?
Yeah, I think there will be a couple of key things to learn in Gen 3.5. So first of all is obviously the attack mode and 4-wheel drive. From the testing that we've done so far, it definitely gives a big benefit, especially on the traction side. So rather than it being a kind of inconvenience over the past couple of seasons, I think it will be really a benefit now to battle against someone that doesn't have the attack mode. So I think overtaking, we'll probably see much more overtaking on attack mode, unless everyone is on attack mode, then it will be status quo, let's say. But if you're smart and use it at the right time, I think you can make a big difference. And then there's obviously the tires. Tires are always a big thing in Formula E in terms of putting them in the right temperature window, especially for qualifying. So that's going to be one of the key learnings where, if you're on top of that early in the season, you can make an early impression, let's say. So I think that's the kind of the key points where we'll spend a lot of time on, try to understand it, and hopefully have a little bit of a head start compared to some of our competitors.
In terms of your program for next season, you're one of the busiest working people in show business, Stoffel. You've got these dual programs. Actually, in your case, a triple program, of course. You've got Peugeot Sport in the WEC, and you're working with Aston Martin as well in Formula One and attending several Grand Prix as well. I mean, you've never been busier in your career. As a professional athlete and a driver, I mean, how do you actually organise everything? You don't seem to be this kind of person who has a massive team around you as well. I mean, management-wise, you do work with people, but you seem to be quite self-sufficient. Is it a case of being so busy that you enjoy it and you thrive on that, or is it something that you've just got to keep on top of organisationally from your personal standpoint? It
definitely adds some challenges, let's say. I would say the biggest challenges are actually managing all the teams together, let's say, in terms of what gets priority over what, and to kind of fit in the simulator sessions, the marketing commitments, how that's all panning out, let's say. I think that's kind of one of the biggest things to kind of figure out. But if you're kind of ahead of the game and start with that very early on, as soon as you have calendars, then it's fairly easy to make it work out. Then for sure, from a travel point of view, it's intense. It's a lot of traveling. I think there's a couple of periods in the year where you're kind of on the road constantly. Luckily, it's not every period of the year like that. I would say, especially when you have the kind of June, July region where you have a lot of WEC races, you have the FE and then some F1 commitments in between. That's where it gets kind of a little bit hectic, but anything before that and after that is actually perfectly manageable. And I enjoy that as well, because if you're let's say you do just Formula E or something, then the second part of the year there's not that much going on. Okay, you have a little bit of private testing, but it's not really enough, let's say, and I think every driver is different in that respect. Some just want to do one program, some prefer to be a little bit more busy. So I think it's depending on each personality as well.
And final one, Stoffel, you've come off the back of 2 seasons with DS Penske. I think you've been quite upfront about some of the frustrations that you found with those 2 seasons. Going into Maserati MSG, as we mentioned at the top of this chat, a similar kind of hardware in a sense. I mean, from your point of view, was there a feeling last season that you probably needed a bit of a refresher, a bit of a different scene and a different challenge in Formula E?
Yeah, I would definitely say so. I think it's a great opportunity now to kind of hit the reset button and start with a new group of people. It's still not going to be a given, I still know that there is areas I have to work on. I don't think the pure speed has ever been a problem. Let's say it's more kind of in those peloton races that we've seen in Formula E that I haven't always been able to to do the best job, and I'm pretty aware of that. I know exactly what I need to work on, but I also feel working with a different group of people, having a strong team behind me will probably enable me as well to to extract the most out of that. So had a very good feeling with with the team so far. I've met them for a couple of times now before the season starts, and I'm just very excited to get going, see how we go. How competitive we're going to be is a little bit hard to judge. I think everyone is going to make steps forward. We should make a bit of a step forward as well. But if that's going to be enough to to really fight for a championship. That's still a little bit early to say, but I think firstly I'll just look at myself. I'll look at the areas that I have to improve on, and if I manage to put a season together with consistency, without mistakes, then I think that's the maximum we can do, and then we'll count the points at the end of the season.
A good chat with Stoffel there, Sam. I mentioned when I was talking to Jake that he's got a little bit to prove, hasn't he? I mean, those couple of seasons at DS Penske probably didn't pan out as anyone imagined, but he's not become a bad driver, has he?
No, he hasn't, and I think that's been evident in the non-pack races that we've seen. He's always been there or thereabouts. Some really good qualifying performances, as Jake said, and he's still got it. He's a busy guy, as we talked about in that chat there. Still with Aston Martin in Formula One. Still going to be racing in WEC with Peugeot next season. So he's at the sort of zenith of his career in terms of programs. Reputationally in Formula E, took a little bit of a battering with Jev, who pretty much consistently had the better of him, which is no disgrace. Well,
Jev tends to do that a bit, doesn't he?
Well, he does, and as we've talked about in the past, he's probably the Formula E driver of his existence, really, isn't it? With what he's achieved, I think Stoffel, as he acknowledged there, he needs to sort of change his outlook a little bit with how he is going to.
Is he doing too much?
No, I don't think so. I think logistically it's going to be a bit easier for him as well, isn't it? As he said, because he's racing for a Monegasque team. He lives in Monaco, so that helps him a little bit. But no, I don't think so. I think Buemi does a similar level of program, doesn't he? And has generally always been. If you look at if you plotted a graph of his success in all series, okay, from Gen 2 onwards, he didn't win championships, but he did win in Gen 2, and he's been on podium. So, in terms of performance, no, I don't think so. I think with Stoffel, it's predominantly about how the races transpire with these pack races, and it just goes against his slightly classical, slightly sort of purist way of racing, which is not patronising. It's just he is. No,
there are certain drivers that are rough and tumble, and some that are super smooth, right?
Yeah, he's the anti-Roland, right? I mean, he's the polar opposite to a Roland or a Degrassi. Doesn't like the contact. I don't think any of them like the contact, but look, he's one who wants to keep it clean, wants to keep it progressive, and sometimes it gets the better of him. And actually, I think he's one of these drivers who, when he tries to get the elbows out and the fists out, he overdoes it. He goes too far the other way, and we saw that in Berlin last year. So I think once he addresses it and looks at it, and he's the classic driver, I think, last season who needed a different scene other than DS. I think the Maserati atmosphere will be a bit more conducive to the way that he likes to go racing. So I anticipate him getting, his reputation as a front runner and a potential and a race winner will come back pretty quickly next year.
So Jake's already told us how much we should read into testing, but obviously this is the first time all the cars are going to be together on track, but they've been privately testing all around Europe, and have any been outside of Europe in private testing? What do we know?
They keep it in Europe, mainly Spain. They go to Verano quite a lot. Mallorca is a favourite destination. Obviously, the climate is quite nice out there. Very clement weather, settled. You can get good correlation of data when it's the atmospheric pressure and everything else is settled. So there's been a lot going on. So all the manufacturers who get their allocation 20 days, I think, of testing have been out and about since really mid-August. It's kind of ramped down slightly now because October is the homologation month for the new cars, so they'll all be going to the FIA technical centre to get homologated. So most of the testing's done pre-Valencia, and then they'll get 3 days at Valencia. Very hard to gauge what's been going on. I mean, obviously I've been speaking to teams about how it's been going.
Well, none of them are going to tell you that it's a disaster, are they?
No, they're not. No, they're not. But the interesting thing is when you get manufacturers running together, because they often run together. So what happens is they go to Mallorca or they go to Verano, and one's at one end of the pit lane, the other's at the other, and they,
I love that.
it all goes a bit spaghetti western as they start looking across the pit at each other. But obviously, they talk. There'll be a discussion whilst having a fag or a drink by the back of the garage between different engineers. And the only thing I can say is that the consistent theme or the consistent message is that Nissan appear to be in a very good place with their new car. And that seems to be across the board of their competitors. Obviously, they're playing it down themselves. When I spoke to Tommaso Volpe, he played it down naturally. But you can get an interesting gauge through speaking to other teams. And they all say that the Nissan looks good. And, they spy and they'll take split times, and they'll probably have some cameras around. So it looks like Nissan could be in quite a good place with this Gen 3 Evo car.
Interesting. Well, all that will become apparent. There's also another type of test going on, and in a move that's, I'm not sure there's been anything just like this. There's an all-female test day that's taking place afterwards. So how's that shaping up? Any interesting names lined up?
Well, first of all, I think it's a great initiative, and I think Formula E should be commended for doing something that's got structural integrity rather than something that's a bit tokenistic, which, let's be fair, that's what they did in Diriyah back in 2018 when they had sort of half a dozen drivers.
I wasn't counting that.
In a sort of unstructured way. This feels like a longer term thing where Formula E are getting behind talented young women and making sure that they have got some opportunities and are able to develop relationships with teams. And if 6 of the 22 that are going to be in Valencia get that to a good professional state and get opportunities for further tests, and then who knows what down the line, it's got to be a good thing.
Well, I guess that's the point of it, though, right? What are the opportunities? It's all very well and good, making this happen, but there are no drives available. So where does this lead?
Well, this is the thing, isn't it? I think long term, we know that in Gen 4, that the Gen 4 design is going to have power assisted steering, which gives a much leveler playing field, I think, for across gender racing. I think the fact that the simulators are so crucial in Formula E, and the fact that you can train drivers not just in the physical motion and the physical training of driving these cars, but also mentally preparing them, because the relay of information between driver and engineer and vice versa is intense in Formula E. So there's a lot of things that are part of Formula E racing that new drivers, rookie drivers, have to learn. And I think it has to be a sort of, okay, the marketing element, the media element is part of it, but it shouldn't be pushing it, shouldn't be front and centre. This should be performance related. I'll tell you who I spoke to, Michaela Cerruti the other day, right?
Oh yeah.
And we got,
how's she?
Yeah, she's great. She's just started a family 3 or 4 years ago, and she is working in automotive now. Still keeps an eye on what's going on in racing. And I chatted to her about her brief time in Formula E, and she was a delight. She was really good, and her opinion, and you can read this on the-race.com, got a feature on Michaela, was that it has to be performance driven, that there have to be credible opportunities for women to train and to test and to get familiar with a certain discipline of racing like Formula E. And I think if you do that, naturally you will get 2 or 3 drivers who are capable of doing a good job. And I hopefully this is what happens. I mean, in terms of names, you're going to see Jamie Chadwick there. You're going to see Lilu Adu there, which is exciting. I think she's a very good prospect, racing in Super GT at the moment. You're going to see Juju Noda. You're going to see Sophia Flörsch, Abby Pulling. So you're talking really about the best females in one place in one paddock.
So how's the test going to work? Each team are running 2 drivers. Have they got 2 cars?
Yes, they have. Yeah, they'll get a car each, and they will run in a 3-hour session on the final day of the test. They will have a sort of half-day media day as well. But yeah, the actual running will be a full-on proper test. And I think the fact that it's the last day will be quite interesting, because that'll be the last running that majority of the teams out there have before Sao Paulo, because the cars will be packaged up and freighted across to Brazil pretty soon after that. So I think it will be useful for the teams, not only to evaluate the rookie drivers that are going to be part of that session, but also to actually be part of the pre-preparation for the first round as well. I think it's good. We did a story on Ella Lloyd, who has been racing in Formula 4 in the UK this season, and is managed by Guy Smith and Andy Merrick, both of who we are sort of friends of ours from yesteryear. They rate her very highly, and she's racing with testing with Neon McLaren along with Bianca Bustamante as well. So I think the entry list looks pretty good, actually. I don't know all of the drivers, probably 3/4 of the drivers. I hope that they get some of the Iron Dames there. Marta Garcia will be with the new Kiro team. It'd be great to see people like Michelle Gatting and maybe Sarah Bouvy there as well, because I know them from WEC and I know that they're really good. Dorian Pan, I'm not sure if she's going to be there because she's busy with other things, but her apart, I think we're looking at the top talent in females that are racing internationally.
No, it's going to be fascinating to see how they go, and the fact that they're in the same spec cars. Okay, the track conditions will vary from day to day, but there will be very much a benchmark time having been set across the tests. This will be a genuine, realistic comparison. I think it'll be fascinating to see, and I can't wait to see how it all plays out.
Yep, likewise. I think it will be fascinating. Obviously, you'll be able to read a lot of the analysis and the sort of appraisals of who did what Valencia week at the start of November.
This episode is supported by Merrill. With a dedicated Merrill advisor, you get a personalized plan for your financial goals. And when plans change, Merrill's with you every step of the way. Go to ml.com/bullish to learn more. Merrill, a Bank of America company. What would you like the power to do? Investing involves risk. Merrill Lynch, Pierce, Fenner & Smith Incorporated, registered broker-dealer. Registered investment advisor. Member SIPC.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger for thousands of appetizing ingredients that inspire countless mouth-watering meals. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices. Plus, extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week and up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with points. So you can get big flavors and big savings. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
This episode is supported by Merrill. With a dedicated Merrill advisor, you get a personalized plan for your financial goals. And when plans change, Merrill's with you every step of the way. Go to ml.com/bullish to learn more. Merrill, a Bank of America company. What would you like the power to do? Investing involves risk. Merrill Lynch, Pierce, Fenner & Smith Incorporated, registered broker-dealer. Registered investment advisor. Member SIPC.
Great to hear from Jake and Stoffel, and obviously an exciting prospect in store for them in the season coming up. But there's quite a lot of other things that have been going on in the world of Formula E, Sam. So let's go through a few of these things. Mandated steerer damper? Is this to help with the wrist injuries? Is that where we're going here?
Yeah, it's exactly what it is. The FIA have done quite a bit of work over the past few months in trying to help eradicate this raft of injuries that we've seen in Formula E since... How
many do you reckon we've had? It's been at least 4, hasn't it?
Well, I think I counted up six injuries of varying degrees, obviously the most serious of which was Robin Fries and Sam Bird breaking bones in their hands. Actually, Sam did it twice, didn't he? But the first one was with the Gen 2 car back in 2022. But yeah, I think it's an amalgamation of certain things. The key thing is that the kickback on the steering wheel with any kind of impact just either smashes the hand into the tub, or because the wheels are now effectively sort of square, these sort of fighter jet shaped wheels that they have, that the hands get caught in the wheel. But I think the majority of the actual injuries, of the broken hands at least, have been where the hand's been smashed into the side of the tub. So the kickback is the big issue, and the steering damper, which has been tested in the past 3 or 4 weeks by most of the manufacturers during private testing that they get allocated, I believe is going to help the situation. Now, whether that affects the actual feel of the cars is one for debate, isn't it? I think the initial feedback I've got is that it could well do, that it could alter the driver's style in terms of the feeling they get from the wheel.
It must do, surely.
Yeah. I mean, the few drivers that I spoke to said that they couldn't really feel that much difference. But of course, they're not racing on street tracks or temporary tracks where you've got loads of, the curbing's different. There's just a different experience when the...
Yeah, the surface, is not as billiard smooth and multiple surface changes and all that.
So I think that could be a really interesting point, whether it subtly affects the feel and the response that the driver gets back from their car. So, one to watch now.
And of course, we won't know the effectiveness until someone puts it in the wall, which obviously we don't want to see, but I guess is an inevitability at some stage.
Yeah, I mean, I spoke to Xavier Mestelan Pinon, who's the technical director for the FIA. He's sort of the senior preeminent technical head at the FIA. I spoke to him in Fuji last month, and he was quite confident that this would be something that, might not completely eradicate hand injuries. I mean, look, I remember with Nigel Mansell breaking his wrist at Montreal, 100 years ago, and it occasionally happens. Danny Ricciardo did it, didn't he, at Zandvoort last year? You are very susceptible in the cockpit to injuring your hands.
Well, you see now in IndyCar especially, the drivers basically just letting go of the wheel as they're getting close to the wall to avoid exactly that. Yeah,
that was happening in Formula E as well last season. I mean, Robin Fries did it at Misano and literally just drove into the gravel and retired because he let go of the wheel when I think he was hit by Edo Mortara. So... yeah, I mean, nobody wants to see drivers being forced into doing that, but if it gives them peace of mind that they're not going to injure the hand again, then that's what they'll do. But it shouldn't really be. There has to be solutions, and hopefully this is one part of it. The other part, of course, is potentially having gloves with carbon inserts, which we've talked about before on the podcast, and I think a combination of the two should hopefully stop this happening regularly.
So, the team formerly known as Team China Racing, Neo 333, ERT. If I missed anyone there, I feel like I've missed one.
Well, I often wondered if the 333 actually corresponded to the amount of name changes they've had since 2014. Yes, they are going to be called something different for the new season. We believe, we're talking on the 11th of October, so it's not been announced officially, but we believe, we know that they're going to be called Kiro Race Company, which we believe is to do with new investors and a new era in the team.
Do we know anything about these new investors, or are we waiting for the confirmation of that before breaking cover?
Well, I think I inadvertently met one of them at Portland without knowing who they were. One of those, always on the ball, me, always sharp as a tack, that V2B. No, they, we believe they're LA based. Hopefully on the -race.com in the next few weeks we can have a deep dive into it and hopefully speak to one of them and understand what their plans and their ambitions are for the future. But
we know about one of their plans, don't we?
We do. They're going to run season-old Porsche powertrains, which is, I don't think anyone really saw that coming. Apparently that had been in the pipeline since sort of June time, that this option could be available, and they've done a deal, and they've got the Drivers' Championship winning powertrain from last season. So
now, obviously, the cars are a bit different though with the 3.5 thing. Is it plug and play? Can they just do that?
Yeah, they can. I mean, the actual architecture of the technical package isn't different in the sense that it is the same, obviously the same chassis. So yeah, I mean, you could run pretty much anything in the back of it. They will be effectively a year behind, and we know the advancement and the development that goes on with these manufacturers. So it's not going to be...
If you're being brutal, how far behind was the ERT powertrain?
It was quite a way behind.
So have they caught up, right, by being a year behind it? Are they catching up?
Well, listen, it has to be. Look, they had bespoke suppliers with that package. You know, the ERT manufacturer status was essentially a collection of suppliers, which actually a lot of the manufacturers are, but the IP and the software and the I suppose the packaging of the thing is intrinsic to the manufacturer. In this case, it was a company called Helix, which is a division of Integral Powertrains, which is a load of old McLaren engineers, and a well-known company in sort of Motorsport Valley in the UK. They did a fine job, but it just didn't have the budget or the resources that the manufacturers have, Jaguar, Nissan, Porsche. So they weren't it wasn't the most competitive over a race distance. It was pretty quick, as we saw in the hands of Tictum and Sette Camera on occasions over one lap, but actually maintaining it, you know, the pace during a race was very difficult. So they got their results through stealth or employing pretty extreme tactics like they did in Misano, when they just basically held back. Yeah, exactly. You got a fourth place there. What does it mean? I think on the face of it, it looks and feels exciting that they've got a Porsche powertrain. Look, you know, we'll find out how good this squad and this group of people is, won't we? Because, you know, there won't be a massive excuse anymore. There won't be that kind of, we haven't got the resources, we haven't got the investment, we haven't got the powertrain. We know that powertrain is or will still be competitive, we presume. But the key to it is going to be what support they're going to get from Porsche and how they utilise the hardware that isn't theirs, if you know what I mean. You know, the manufacturers know it inside out. A customer team doesn't. That's why they have liaison engineers from Jaguar to Envision, or from Nissan to McLaren and so forth. If there is the support there, and that's the key question, I think, then they could have a very competitive season. I think ultimately what will happen is they will spend a number of months finding their feet, and then it will be a case of second half of next season. Let's see what results they can get. But we presume Tictum and Sette Camera are going to stay. All the indications are that's the case, and if that's true, they've got a really, really strong squad there potentially.
Yeah, talking of drivers, there's been a couple of confirmations of driver lineups for season 11 as we approach it. One new, one old.
Yes, I think we'll start with the new, right? I mean, Zane Maloney has joined Lucas Di Grassi at the Lola Yamaha Apt team, which have been testing voraciously. Actually, they've been out most weeks since sort of mid-August. Variety of circuits: Verano, Mallorca, and also in the UK as well. Zane Maloney, F2 front runner, F2 race winner, still in the championship hunt. I mean, I can't remember the last time that somebody was up for a major title and then knowingly would miss the final two races, which he will do at Abu Dhabi.
I didn't realise that. Right, so he's
forsaken any chance of a championship in F2 to go on to the next phase of his career, which I think, you know, is commendable. I think that's
it shows commitment. Absolutely,
it absolutely does. I actually a couple of hours ago spoke to the owner of Lola, Till Bechtelsheimer, who I know well, and he was at the Mallorca test and was very impressed with both drivers. Obviously, Di Grassi, you know what you're getting with Lucas Di Grassi, next champion, but he was especially waxing lyrical about Zane Maloney and what he's bringing to the team and his ambition and the sort of clarity of understanding the next phase of his career is going to be upon him, and he's going to make the most of it. So it'd be fascinating to see how he gets on. I think it's a big ask in this first season with a new package that hasn't been developed. I think there's a lot of work to do there, but I think he'll ultimately be good.
It's a tough championship for a rookie, full stop, but coming into a sort of a generation upgrade, even trickier, I would say.
Yeah, I think so. But I having spoken to Zane a couple of times when he's been a reserve for Andretti and tested on occasion, you know when you just get the feeling when you speak to a youngster, and you know there's that sort of clarity and that kind of just in their eyes as well, it's just like they are just solely focused on performance and results, and he's very much of that disposition. He's from a racing family in Barbados, and he's just just that sort of wolf-like sort of look in his eyes. It's like he's just there to do one thing, which is to win races. And
so we're going to see the Bushy Park logos on the side of the car, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I mean, it's his neck of the woods, isn't it? I think his father is something to do with that facility. I'm sure that that there is a sort of connection there somewhere along the line. But irrespective of that, I think somebody of Maloney's caliber coming into Formula E is a great news story. And look, he's 20. I think he's 20, isn't he? He's not 21 yet. Which, with Taylor Barnard as well, brings down the average age quite considerably of the field.
Oh, I think this is really positive for Formula E. Like you say, somebody who's been a front runner. He's not making up the numbers in F2. He's a front runner in that series. Choosing this as his career progression rather than hanging on for a test development role or something in Formula One is very positive for FE.
It is, and I think it'll be interesting because if he is successful, and I'm not saying he will be in his first season, I think that's a stretch, but if he, even in performances, if he did what Nico Muller did to Lucas Di Grassi last season, I think a lot of other drivers in Formula 2, Formula 3, other areas of the sport potentially will look at Formula E and go, yeah, okay, well, I can do a job because, I stacked up well against A. Maloney, or I think I can do, and there are manufacturers in it, and I'm getting paid. So why wouldn't you look at it seriously?
Well, I think that's the thing, isn't it, right? Rather than having to bring a shed load of money, actually become a professional racing driver, which, at the end of the day, there aren't many of those in the world. So that's sort of almost career objective complete.
Absolutely. Which sort of links in nicely to our next signature signing, which has got a lot of familiarity about it. Norman Nato is going back to Nissan.
It's deja vu all over again.
Yeah, I mean, what an incredible sort of Formula E career Norman Nato's had. Venturi, then he was a reserve and occasional racer at Jaguar for one event only, deputising for Bird, and then he rocked up at Nissan, did a reasonable job at Nissan, did a reasonable job at Andretti, and that's the thing, isn't it, with Norman Nato? He does a good, solid job. He'll get you points. It might not be spectacular unless it's the last day of the season, which he tends to specialise in.
But how's he going to compare against someone at the level of Max Verstappen?
Yeah, well, I accused Sasha Fenestraz of imbibing in magic mushrooms on Twitter the other day. Obviously, that's a joke. But yeah, there's a bit of cosmic consciousness in that, isn't there? Extraordinary. I don't know what that was. Was that sort of reputation management
it's something wrong? Like that, but I mean, it's not to say that Ollie Rowland is not operating at a very, very high level. He is a fabulous racing driver. But, let's be clear here. Right?
Let's be realistic. I think things need to be tempered a bit on that. Well, I think we're all sort of we've been impressed by Oliver Rowland over the years, but there are limits. Anyway, Norman Nato going back to Nissan. Yeah, I mean, I spoke to Tommaso Volpe about this, and it wasn't a smooth transition. There was a lot of toing and froing, let's say, about whether they were going to keep Fenestraz or not. They elected not to, and actually it's hard to argue against that, although I always thought that a reasonably conservative Japanese manufacturer would err on the side of continuity. That wasn't the case. And Norman's back. And actually, if you look at Nato's season with Fenestraz in 2023, he outscored him reasonably handsomely. And he got a second place at the Rome Prix that year. Yet he was the one that vacated a seat for Oliver Rowland. So yeah, interesting dynamics there. I tend to think that this will be a continuation of one-year deals for Norman, sadly for him. And I expect maybe a sort of what you might bracket a marquee signing for 26. I think Antonio...
I think it's a sensible signing. You sort of know what you're going to get. I think he'll score more points than Fenestraz did. And, as we did in our season review, that was the difference between them moving up in the teams championship. And I think, it's a safe pair of hands.
Exactly, yeah. And then on his day, when everything comes together, he can get podiums, and he's proved he can get a win as well. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of logic in what they've done there as well. But yeah, I mean, the grid is almost completed, as I said. I think it's just the ERT. No, not ERT. Kiro. We're expecting them. I think Dan Ticktum is a shoe in there. It's just a question of whether Sete Camera is signed up. I think he probably will be.
I mean, given all the new things that are taking place there, surely having some continuity and stability on the driver lineup makes a lot of sense.
It does now. Yeah.
Especially as they both operating at a pretty decent level as well. There's no doubt they're both quick.
Exactly. Who else is there at this stage of the season? I mean, the aforementioned Fenestraz is probably the only one. Jahan Deruvala, you probably wouldn't take him ahead of either of those drivers. So I think it's highly likely that there will be no change in the driving department at this newly named team.
Right, there's a thing on the script here, Sam, that says financial regulation compliance. Now, do I need to pop out and get a coffee here while you run through this? Or it's not setting my heart racing.
It's going to be one of those apps you can get that plays
white noise.
white noise or Brian Eno music. This is we are hearing, and there's going to be a story on this, and it'll probably be out by the time this is released. That at least one team has failed an element of compliance on the financial regulations and will likely face a sanction. Now, that sanction is most likely to be a fine, but it could be a sporting penalty as well. We're still trying to find out exactly which team this is, or teams. We believe there could be two. So, yeah, I suppose it's dropping a little hint really here, but there will be a piece on it on the -race.com. So, yeah, have a little butchers on that, because it could be quite interesting.
Or just outline what the financial regulations are. There is effectively a budget cap, right? But it's not called that.
It's not, no. The financial regulations essentially mirror, obviously, different budgets in terms of maximums, Formula One. So there is a set criteria of operational, of marketing, of travel, of obviously technical, everything that is essentially combined to put the car and the team operational in Formula E. There are certain things that sit outside it. One of those things is driver salaries, so that is not included in the cap itself. And there is a team and a manufacturer one. So the team one is 13 million and the manufacturer budget is, I believe, 15 million. I have to double check those figures.
Euro, pounds, dollars?
Euros, yes. So this is, in terms of how they are audited, this is the interesting, but at the same time probably quite boring for a podcast bit, in the sense that the FIA has a
if we go into the technicality of these rules, Sam, I will just mute you.
Well, I did while away an evening this week. This is how tragic my life is, of looking through the regulations, and woke up 3 hours later snoozing watching Newsnight. It is quite involved. There is quite a lot that has to be digested in those, but there are independent auditors that the FIA has. It's a panel. It's an auditing panel, and it's quite opaque. So we haven't heard anything from the FIA. I have been in touch with the FIA, and I think some of that will be reflected in the piece we do on the -race.com.
Well, obviously it wouldn't be a Formula E podcast without there being some sort of calendar update, Sam. So we'll roll the jingle, and then you can tell us the latest on the season 11 calendar.
Tell you what, I wish I had royalties on that jingle, because I'd be a very rich man now.
You'd have at least
calendar
£10
updates. So, we're speaking on the 11th of October. The World Motorsport Council meeting is about 5 days away. Everything that we understand at the moment is that the March date, which was allocated, although never actually
it was always a TBC, right?
It was always TBC, but it was well known within the paddock that the plans were to race in Chiang Mai in northern Thailand. And
well, my plans were very much to go out there and tag a holiday on the end. So.
Well, I don't think you will be now. No. As we discussed in the previous podcast. Well, actually, the racing would be similar on a bank holiday at Skegness, wouldn't it? With some of the races that Formula E has. Anyway, it looks unlikely, highly unlikely, that the tyre race can happen now through elections and political destabilisation over there. The plan B, I believe, or one of the plan Bs was Sanya, going back to Sanya, which held a race in 2019. That appears now to be difficult, and I think the likelihood is that will be a fallow race now, that there will be no race.
How big a gap does that create?
It creates a gap of 8 weeks.
Oh my God.
I mean, I actually find the fact that now in Formula E's second decade we are having these gaps again, and they're coming familiar.
It's not far off that ridiculous gap between the first race and the second race, which is 11 weeks.
Well,
you cannot establish momentum when you have a 2-month gap between races.
There aren't any excuses anymore. I think this is embarrassing, actually, to the point of incompetence. No other series in the world has a 2-month gap in its schedule. And it has the effect of losing any kind of momentum that the championship carves out for itself in the first few events.
And that'll be the bit where the new F1 season starts, and then all the motorsport interest goes over to there.
The calendar has been, and clearly to a large extent still is, a seriously weak issue for Formula E. Nothing is changing. There was no viable plan B for Changmei stroke Sanya, I believe. And yes, it's circumstances beyond Formula E's control with political issues, with elections. But the elections were in July. You know, that's a full 9 months before this race was supposed to happen. So surely a reserve fixture could be sourced and added, but clearly not. I mean, what this adds up to, in my opinion, it just kind of rubbishes all these messages that Formula E consistently gives about having 20...
Well, they acknowledge, right, there's 2 weak points, the TV deals and the calendar.
Yeah.
And the first one that needs to be fixed is still broken.
It is. But how many times do we hear C-suite executives from Formula E saying, well, we got 24, 25 cities queuing up to host races? I mean, that's clearly...
As Delia Smith would say, where are you? Let's be having you.
I mean, it just, the credence and credibility of Formula E, I think it sort of kind of has to be questioned a bit here. You can't have a 2-month gap. It's racing or sports business is all about momentum. That is why behemoths like the Premier League have very small, close seasons, right? And lots of what you call global...
Well, these international breaks, as we're on at the time of recording, like England will pay 2, maybe even 3 fixtures in that time, because the Premier League needs to get those fixtures in, right? That's...
Yeah, but the calendar. I don't. Where does the buck stop with the calendar? Is there a case now for saying Formula E, if it is to be taken seriously on this schedule and their campaign front, is there a case to say, well, it needs a change? It needs a committee, a proper committee.
And we all understand the challenges, right? It is not easy. The balancing up. Getting the cities there, the political stuff, all the other things that are going on around them. This is something that's worked on 18 months in advance.
Yeah. Look, it's not the only problem. There's another clash with WEC in July. The Tokyo E-Prix clashes with the Super Formula round down the road at Autopolis. There's a lot that needs to change with this because it just diminishing the products. Again, at the end of the day, I mean, ironically, the Super Formula race on the same weekend as the Tokyo doubleheader, I asked somebody quite senior at Formula E about it. They didn't even know that the Super Formula race was going to be put on that day. They hadn't spoken to the Japanese Automobile Federation or any of the promoters at Super Formula about it. So, yeah, more questions than answers again.
And on that absolutely... barnstormingly positive note. Now, look, obviously, season 11 with these new cars, there's every reason to be excited about it, and we will be excited about it, and I'm sure the racing is good. But they've got to sort these calendars out. But hopefully we'll have all that news covered, all the news from testing on the-race.com. So, please check that. And don't forget to check out our other podcasts, including the new series of Colossias Motorsport, where Matt Bishop and Richard Williams are looking back at some of the amazing stories from the history of motorsport. Kicked off the new season with a look into Spygate with some personal recollections that I didn't even realise from that era, and a second superb episode looking at Niki Lauda and his accident in 1976. So if you want to go back and look at a time when calendars were all over the place. Races were regularly cancelled. Although they did put on, in 76, they did put a race on in Japan, despite the conditions being absolutely atrocious and unraceable, because they had a satellite that was only available for a short period of time. So, plus que change. Well, to quote The Godfather 3, just when I thought I was out, they pull me back in. It's a special bonus episode ending for this podcast that who knows how long this has now been going, dear listener, and we really thank you for your patience and indulgence as we go well into our second hour, I'm sure. Right, Sam, why are we back recording this at some godforsaken time in the morning? It's actually cold and my office door is open.
Well, by the way, Godfather 3 is by far the worst of the three Godfathers. I mean,
easily the worst, but that's the good quote from it. That's the only
one good quote. Yeah, okay. Well, I'm the Fredo, obviously, of the race editorial team, so I'll give you a little update on what's been happening. We talked about the golden lap idea that has gone before it started. So that was not part of the sporting regulations. It was going to be. The teams were told.
Is this just because of the backlash against it, or this feels a bit like Max Mosley's old way of just putting crazy stuff out there and then rowing back later on?
Yeah, I think there's been, the oars have been used quite a lot on this one, I think. There was a big backlash, and ultimately, the good thing is that they seem to have listened, the promoters in particular. This idea did come from the promoters initially, and in liaison with the FIA, was going to be part of the sporting framework for this season. Probably to be used if only the attack charge wasn't ready and isn't ready, and we'll find that out after Valencia, after it's evidenced yet again. So yeah, it's done. It's dead in the water. I think the communication around this has been a little bit poor. Let's say. I mean, there was a moment in the DS launch, which I attended in Paris last week, where Jean-Eric Vergne started talking about it and then was given the kind of, across the neck gesticulation by Alberto Longo, who obviously didn't want anyone to know about it, so it was a bit of a mess, a bit embarrassing. But it's done. That idea is gone, and I think there'll be quite a lot of people exhaling quite a lot about that, because nobody seemed to be particularly up for it. And now the emphasis looks as though it's going to be on attack charge. So let's see when that might come in. I suspect that it'll probably, the earliest it would probably be Mexico City, because of the infrastructure and the way the pit lanes are in Formula E. Sao Paulo just wouldn't work. But I actually think that maybe the Jeddah double header could be one, and they actually use one of the races there, and they target the double headers first off to do 1 day with, 1 day without, perhaps.
We're going to be talking about this all season again, aren't we? I just don't care.
Well, some do, and they tend to be the competitors, and you do get a real cross section of opinion on whether this idea should be implemented. Obviously, I think everybody's aligned that it should be implemented across the board, as in it should be a permanent, should either be in or out, shouldn't it?
How many seasons has this been going? Is this the third year of it potentially coming on the cars?
Well, there was a notion it was going to be part of the first Gen 3 era. That was the original idea, and then that just couldn't happen.
Yeah.
They actually started testing this, I believe, in September 22 was the first test they did, in the manufacturer tests. And then it couldn't happen in the first season of Gen 3, and then last season it just wasn't reliable enough. The reliability is getting better. I'm told that there was some tests last week. They got an extra day of testing, whether live or just sort of dummy test. I think there was a combination, and it seems to be on the cusp of being ready. But obviously, I think Valencia there'll be all eyes on that to see that there is a sort of element of bulletproof reliability to make sure it can be introduced at some stage.
Well, I'll look forward to that. We don't mention it very often in these podcasts, but there is actually a cost cap in Formula E, and 2 of the teams have been found guilty of breaching it. So you wrote a very good article about this online, Sam, but explain to our listeners exactly what happened and what it means.
Yeah, so this goes back to the cost cap, which was introduced in season 9, which was the 2022-23 season. Don't forget that Formula E straddles the years in in its championship years. So 2 teams, Nissan and Jaguar, have been adjudged to have breached the cost cap, and the cost cap for the teams is 13 million. This breach is on the side of the teams because they also, if you're a manufacturer as well, you get a manufacturer allowance, a budget as well of 15 million, which covers 2 seasons. So the one season is to the 13 million, which was gone over by Jaguar to the tune of 0.6% infringement, which was a €100,000 fine, and Nissan got a larger fine of €300,000 as well. That's for just under a 2% breach on that cost cap.
2% is quite significant, isn't it?
It's equivalent to £269,000. So yeah, I mean, the way that they find them, obviously, I think it's probably about right. There's also a sporting sanction, which is probably more damaging in the sense that they will miss the first half of the test at Valencia. So for the first 3 hours, Nick Cassidy, Mitch Evans, Ollie Rowland, and Norman Nato get an extra few hours in bed. I mean, yeah, that they will lose data and they'll lose a bit on the opposition, but it's Valencia. They've been there before. They've done manufacturer testing, both of these outfits. So I don't think it's a massive hit for them. But the interesting thing about it for me, and the teams come to what they call a recognised acceptance or an accepted breach agreement, an ABA, that the FIA have as a protocol and procedure, and it's very similar to the Red Bull Racing breach of 2022 in the way that it happens, the audit, and then there is an appeal and a discussion, and then they accept the breach. At the end of the day, accounting and auditing is kind of black and white, isn't it? I think. But within this, there are certain nuances, and the key one for me, and I think for the teams in particular and the manufacturers, is that in season 9 it was the first year of the Gen 3 era, and we reported in a detailed fashion the difficulties and challenges. Let's say that's a polite way to put it. The teams would use more robust language, I think, for what occurred in that year. But there were many issues, and a lot of it included part supply and a deference of specs of some parts, notably the battery, and that meant that teams had to change and adapt and pivot, and actually had to do extra testing, and they had to do shift plans and incur further costs, I'm sure, and that had to be realigned for the cost cap for that year. They were told, I believe, the teams and the manufacturers, that they had to. There was a degree of leniency. There was a degree of not wiggle room. That's the wrong word. But there would be an understanding that because of the difficulties, that there would be some leniency. And I certainly know from sources within both of those manufacturers that there is some unhappiness that there doesn't seem to have been that power exercised, and that's an interesting one. But a bit of time's gone now. A few days have gone since this sanction, and I actually think it's probably about right to have a sporting and a financial.
So
one.
They're not appealing, right? They're just taking it on the chin.
Yeah,
and
it's done. It's. Yeah. I think the key for me though is there's a lot of discrepancy between who you speak to in the paddock about if the cost cap is right, particularly the manufacturer one, which is the 15 million over 2 seasons. And I think that probably has to be looked at, because some say it's too much, some say it's too little, and it's not attractive enough to manufacturers coming into the championship. And there is, I
mean, in a global motorsport budget sense, it's peanuts, right?
It is. It absolutely is. But look, the facts are that Formula E hasn't attracted well, look, Lola have come in, Maserati have come in kind of through the back door, but in terms of
sort of,
yeah, I mean, in terms of a prestige OEM, the last big one was Porsche, wasn't it, in 2019, which isn't far off, 6 years away. So
that does feel like a long time ago now, pre-COVID.
It is, it is. Time. So several manufacturers are left, and only one big OEM, let's call them, has come in, and I just wonder if that's going to be looked at in terms of the carrots that are dangled in front of manufacturers. I mean, the manufacturers that have been on the periphery and looking in and been to a few races and seem to be semi-serious in what they might do in the future are Hyundai and BYD. They've been seen in the paddock, and they have had discussions about the potential of coming in. That looks unlikely for Gen 4 as we sit here now.
Well, they're cutting it fine, aren't they?
They are. Yeah, I mean, by the end of the year, we're going to have to know. And obviously, there's the question of Stellantis and Mahindra still, which we expect a decision in the coming weeks. It's November.
Oh, I forget that Stellantis haven't officially confirmed.
No, they haven't. And I was at the launch and spoke to a few senior members of their team, Eugenio Franzetti and Jean-Marc Fino, who's the boss of Stellantis, and both of them were very sort of non-committal in the future for the brand, particularly for DS. But obviously, it could encompass numerous brands coming in place of DS if they are withdrawn from the championship. But there was some bullishness from the deputy CEO and the COO of Formula E, the promoter side, Alberto Longo, who said that he was, I think he was super confident with the words that he used. So he maybe knows something that others don't. But let's see. It's all to pan out. But a lot of it depends on, I think, the optics of some of the Stellantis brands losing a lot of money at the minute and been seen to spend on marketing, that old chestnut of manufacturing.
Well, that's ultimately the downfall of many a motorsport project,
Indeed.
right?
Indeed it is. And if they can realign things or recalibrate with another brand, I mean, Alfa Romeo is out there. We've talked. I've written about Dodge potentially, but there's also a lot of difficulty with Stellantis in the US at the minute, and lots of complex automotive topics that Carlos Tavares, who is their chief, is trying to juggle at the minute. And he, by the way, is going to be retiring in 2026. So there is again a bit of a power shift, and we know that Tavares is a big race fan and competes himself.
Huge motor.
Yeah, I think he's got a Lola T70 and a Chevron. And
there's the mark of a man.
Indeed,
right?
Indeed.
So one final bit, we have some driver market news. The Kiro team, or ERT, or Team China Racing, Neo 333 of Yore, striking new livery and striking new lineup.
Yes, well, yet to be officially determined, but what we found out this week was that it appears that the new collaboration with Porsche, in the sense that they will run Porsche season 10 spec, so last season spec Porsche powertrains next season, that the collaboration appears to be a little deeper, with the suggestion that their reserve and development driver David Beckman will be at Valencia testing alongside Dan Ticktum. It appears to be in place of Sergio Sette Camara. There's yet to be word from the team. It could be that Sergio is at Valencia, but it looks like David Beckman will be in pole position for that seat. They're not expected to confirm their drivers absolutely until after the Valencia test. So it's essentially, it seems to be an audition. Now, on one level, it's a surprise, because we expected Sette Camara to continue for a third season with Ticktum. But I think looking at it with a bit of time now, it does make a lot of sense in light of the fact that David Beckman has done a fair few days of private testing and public testing with that Porsche. He's been embedded with the team for a couple of years. He will know that powertrain very well indeed, and his junior career is good. I mean, he is of the generation.
It's an interesting choice. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, he's come from the Formula 3 generation of George Russell, Lance Stroll, Max Gunter, and he sort of held his own against those guys. He wasn't, he wasn't winning championships and a consistent race winner, but he was strong, and he did a lot of F2 cameos as well, sort of kind of a German Jake Hughes, if you like, sort of been plugged in when people had tripped up in the shower or dropped a bottle of salad cream on their foot or whatever, and he I think he did that cameo in Jakarta last year, didn't he? 2023, when Lotterer did the Le Mans test day and was compromised, and he didn't set the world alight. I think he finished 16th and then crashed out the second one.
Yeah, a one-off is impossible. Right?
Yeah, difficult one to gauge what he's about, but certainly some senior members of the Porsche team rate him very highly. So look, let's see. If he can give Kiro a bit of a leg up in understanding the Porsche 999X electric powertrain, then it could pay dividends for them. And if he's competitive, then kind of everyone's a winner.
Right, I think the listeners' poor dogs have more than exercised now, so we'll allow them to have a little bit of a rest. And thank you, Sam, for this monstrous episode. I guess the next one will be post-Valencia test, where we'll actually have some competitive times to look at. Yeah,
it'd be good to see what goes on there. 3 days of testing, including the all-female test, by the way. And just to state that we've got a full list now of drivers. Jamie Chadwick and Lilu Wadu have been confirmed at Jaguar. Simona de Silvestre is going to be Kiro. Lena Bula, we believe, is at Mahindra, although it's not been announced while we speak. But looks like we've got a really, really stacked list of probably, you'd say, the cream of the top women that race around the world in various series. I think Dorian Pan is the only one who's not there, and she's got other commitments. But yeah, I mean, all the top women racers are going to be on track. So yeah, be fun to see how they get on that Thursday afternoon.
Brilliant. Well, good stuff. And obviously keep an eye on the-race.com for all of Sam's news from Valencia paddock. And we'll speak to you soon. Goodbye.
The Athletic.